we're going to write some numbers correct to one decimal place. The first one to consider is 7.84. Consider a number line. 7.84 is between 7.8 and 7.9. So one of these two numbers would be 7.84, correct to the nearest one decimal place. Exactly halfway between these two is 7.85. 7.84 is this side and therefore is closer to 7.8. So 7.84 is 7.8, correct to one decimal place. Rather than drawing a number line every time we want to do this process, let's see if we can do it another way. We had to decide whether 7.84 was closer to 7.8 or 7.9. To do this, we considered 7.85, which is the halfway point. If the number is less than 7.85, then it's closer to 7.8. And if it's more than 7.85, it's closer to 7.9. If we look at our number 7.84, we can decide this by looking at the second decimal place. If the second decimal place is a 0 to 4, then it's going to be closer to the number below. And if it's a 5 to 9, it's going to be closer to the number above. Consider 22.943. To one decimal place, this number is either going to be 22.9 or 23.0. The second decimal place here is a 4, so we're closer to 22.9, and so we have 22.9 correct to one decimal place. Note here, with the 4 in the second decimal place, that the first decimal place remained as a 9. For 3.582, the second decimal place is an 8. 3.582 is between 3.5 and 3.6. And since this is an 8 in the second decimal place, it's closer to 3.6. So we get 3.6, correct to one decimal place. Note here that when the second decimal place was an 8, the first decimal place increased by 1 from 5 to 6. So if the second decimal place is a 0 to 4, the first decimal place does not change. If the second decimal place is a 5 to 9, then the first decimal place increases by 1. For 18.28, the second decimal place is an 8, and that means the first decimal place will increase, giving us 18.3, correct to one decimal place. 12.05. This is a 5, and this means that we increase the first decimal place by 1 from 0 to 1. Finally, consider 9.99. This is quite a difficult one. The second decimal place here is a 9, which means we need to round the first decimal place up. But if we round 9 up, the only place it can go to is 10. And we're only allowed one digit in any particular column. So what happens with the 10 is that the 1 goes across into the next column, rounding this 9 up into a 10. We therefore get 10.0 correct to 1 decimal place. Since this one is quite difficult to think about in this way, consider a number line. 9.99 is between 9.9 and 10.0, considering numbers to 1 decimal place. We know halfway in between is 9.95, and 9.99 is in this region, closer to 10.0. This way it's easy to see that this is 10.0, correct to 1 decimal place.